We read at the beginning of the Torah how in the beginning God created existence. And we've discussed many times the appellation through which God is referred to indicates in what context is God related to existence. The appellation of God, Elohim, is the attribute of justice. The four-letter name of God, which we don't pronounce based on its vowels, which we pronounce Adni, master, that is Midas HaRachmin. That's the attribute of mercy. But Elohim is the attribute of justice. The Torah begins, Bereshis bor Elohim. In the beginning, Elohim created. And then continuously it says, Vayomer Elohim, and God, Elohim said. So seemingly, if the appellation for God is Elohim, initially creation was meant to be created with the attribute of justice. However, later we find there's a switch. It's referred to Hashem Elohim. The four-letter name, which indicates the attribute of mercy, is coalescing the judgment of God. So Rashi cites the Midrash that originally God's intent was to create the world with the attribute of justice. However, since man is prone to fail, so therefore he coalesced into that the attribute of mercy. To give you endless chances to make corrections, to make amends, to be able to succeed to a greater degree. Because if you would rein in based on the attribute of justice immediately, there's no tomorrow. It's without mercy. Therefore, it's Hashem Elohim. The appellation for mercy is associated with the appellation for justice. So we asked the question in the past, if you're coming to judge a person, innocent or guilty, there are two ways he could be evaluated, either within the context of judgment, exactness, or to be more merciful. Ultimately, he'll pay his price. Are we going to dole it out over an extended period of time? Are we going to give him a chance to do tshuva? Right? That's attribute of mercy. Din means no chances. You've crossed the line immediately, you're reined in upon, and you're punished. That's immediate. So regarding evaluation of person, we understand exact judgment, merciful judgment. But in regard to creation, there's even before man was created, the God Elohim created. Elohim said, let there be light, let there be this. What relevance does the attribute of justice have to do with existence before mankind, the human being, was even created? So we had explained that what is the difference between attribute of justice and attribute of mercy? Attribute of justice is God is exacting. There's no detail that's not taken into account regarding that particular judgment, regarding the verdict. Background is irrelevant. Well, he didn't have a sufficient background. That's justice. Ignorance is not an excuse. You ingest something which is poison, you die. You did an action which ultimately consumes your spirituality, it's instantaneous death. Or you compromised permanently. But God says no. Because man is prone to fail, God says, I have to coalesce mercy. That's what it's about. So when we speak about God wanted to create the world initially with the attribute of justice, means the world is exacting. Why? What it means, it's exact. Everything's exact. Once the world is created through the lens of exactness, there's nothing superfluous in existence. You have an unlimited amount of species. Every species that's there is needed, is exact. The species are needed in terms of the objective of bringing creation to a complete level. The forestry, the agriculture, the soil, the fish in the sea, the species, the water, all that is exact for the sake of what? To allow the world to achieve a level of perfection. But that's exact. So if all existence is exact, so now we create the human being, seemingly use the same yardstick. He's created exact. Factually, the human being as a person, as a creation, is exact. This is exactness. The various systems within the human being to be able to function, to be able to be effective, the brain, the movement, the internal organs, the external limbs, the systems, the circulatory system, the lungs, how everything complements and one another. It's amazing. The body is perfect. It's God's perfect creation. So if the person's perfect in terms of creation, what about his behavior? How do I value his behavior? If his essence was created with exactness, you should meet that same standard of exactness. If you were created exact, your behavior should be exact. And if you go and you cross lines and you compromise, immediately that should compromise the exactness of your being. That's the understanding. So the man, human being's exact. The world, there's nothing superfluous in existence. If that is the case, anything which doesn't meet that standard of exactness should turn the world on its head. Of course, it functions within exactness. But yet, when it comes to the function, which is the human being, even if your behavior is not exact, and you fail multiple times, God says somehow we're going to reconcile this with the what? With the exactness of existence, although that's the profile. That's the attribute of mercy. But why does the world have to be exact? Why? The soul is exact. We find David HaMelech, King David says in Psalms, Torah Hashem Temima. The Torah of God is perfect. We know that Torah is comprised of 613 mitzvos, commandments. God, the number 613, that is perfection. That's perfect. Only God knows why. If you want to achieve perfection in the spiritual realm, it's 613. 248 positive commandments, 365 negative commandments. That's how you establish exactness, perfection. What is the objective of creation? To live within the context of Torah. Why do we exist in an existence where we have choice and things are not clear? Because what is the proving grounds? What is existence? We spoke about evil. What is the value of evil? The value of evil is not to do evil, to give us a context of choice. And if we choose to do the right thing, then we're deserving of the result of that choice, because it was due to our own initiative we brought about that. So perfection is brought about through making the right choice. That's what it's about. What's the objective? The objective is perfection. And what is the mandate that we must abide by? It's called Torah. The mandate is exact. You must live within a context of exactness. The Torah is exact. And if you fail, you're compromised. The human being was made exact. There's nothing superfluous in the body. External, internal. Everything is needed for its function. We had said in the name of Rav Chaim Vital, who was the student of the Arizal, who recorded all his teachings as the 248 parts to the human body, the 248 parts, components to the neshama, to the soul, to the Jewish soul. And now, how do we actualize and live the Torah? Through our physicality. We're physical beings. We're challenged. We have to make choices. There's a corresponding factor between every part of the body and every part of the soul. The soul is the life source. We function as spiritual beings to be functional within a physical existence. That's what we call the neshama. So the 248 parts of the neshama, of the soul, those components correspond to the 248 parts of the human body. The heart, or the ventricles, or the chambers, there's some kind of corresponding factor to a certain part of the soul. Why? Because what is the source of life in the human being as an intelligent being, which ultimately the result has to be a spiritual level of completion, of bring about perfection, wholesomeness. It's the soul. So therefore, the body facilitates that completion, the perfection within the soul, which it corresponds to that part of the soul. That's the understanding. If the objective of creation is the observance of the Torah, and the Torah is perfect, there's nothing superfluous in the Torah. Therefore, we're not permitted to add or detract. So if the proving ground is existence, physical existence, and existence was created only to facilitate the setting for the fulfillment of the Torah, that means just as in the Torah there's nothing superfluous, there's nothing superfluous in existence, because everything in existence was created to facilitate the objective of the fulfillment of the Torah, and the positive and the negative. That's the reason why the appellation of God for exactness, which is the attribute of justice, was chosen. Because the objective is the observance of the Torah. And when you do that in an exact format, you affect the body. And the body is perfect, as the body's meant to be. As a human being, we're created perfect as humans. We have failings, but that's the challenge. The physical, external, internal, that's perfect. Unless the person is born handicapped. But many people, most people are not born handicapped. So we find interesting, the world itself, there's nothing superfluous. Because the world is the proving out for the person. The person, there's nothing superfluous in the human being. There's nothing superfluous in the soul. The body corresponds to the soul in every aspect. The body is the facilitator that facilitates the choice to bring about the perfection of the soul. Now, what does the body use? In Kemach and Torah. Right? If there's no physicality, you can't live as a human being. We put parchment on our doorpost. That's from an animal. We wear tefillin, it's leather, besides the parchment inside. We eat kosher. We bring sacrifices. This is all part of what? Our spiritual profile. So all these species, the specific species, the kosher species, that have two signs which indicate classified as kosher species. You have domesticated species. You have undomesticated species. All this is to create the setting which is exact to accommodate and facilitate. The objective of the human being is to make those choices. Now it's very interesting. Not too many years ago, maybe 2 years ago, I read an article in the way God created the human being. Unbelievable. The moment the person has an idea, you want to lift your arm, what happens? And you're a fully functioning person. How do you lift your arm? A message is sent from the brain. through the nervous system that your arm should be lifted. So you're able to lift your arm. You're able to breathe. You're able to swallow. Because when you want to swallow, and you have to swallow so often, you have to breathe so often, if the lung would be paralyzed, you couldn't breathe. So the lung inhales, exhales. The heart beats as it beats, because this is all connected to the nervous system, the neurological system, and affects everything. The chemistry, the chemicals that are released into the bloodstream, the insulin, many things. All this is activated by senses. When a person has a certain sense, all systems are affected differently. This was to me, so that I always understood. But then I read this article, unbelievable article. You know, the saliva in our mouth, people have different types of saliva, different, more acidic, more alkaline, and all that has to do when, besides the teeth, if a person wouldn't have teeth to chew the food, you'd have difficulty digesting that food, even though it goes into the stomach, which has acid, which breaks down the food in a way and separates many things to nourish the body, but it has to be pulverized or chewed. Wouldn't it be chewed? The body doesn't have the capacity to be able to process that. It would have to be pureed before you would allow it to go into your stomach. You couldn't take it in whole pieces, just swallow whole pieces. Even if you get it down your throat. But the saliva already starts breaking down that food, because the saliva itself has the alkaline and the acid, whatever that balance is, which has to do with what? With the beginning of the process for the food to break down, so the body should benefit from that food. When you put food in your mouth, there's senses in the mouth that could sense immediately that you put a carbohydrate in your mouth, whether you put a protein in your mouth, whether you put something sweet or something sour. The senses are able to sense all this, and immediately, the moment they sense it, the message is sent to the brain. The brain really gives the order, gives out certain chemicals, the certain secretions, and those secretions deal with whatever the senses pass on to the brain. And that involved how we function, what is needed to digest that food. Because the food that went into the mouth, the message was, it's this kind of food, therefore we need a certain time of secretion, because it's a carbohydrate, it's a protein, it's whatever else it may be. Therefore, it's amazing how everything is linked and hooked up to what one's mind is, what one emotional person gets excited, person's passionate, a person's sedate, a person's heart rate drops, rises when you move, when you sleep, when you're calm, when you're intense. It's unbelievable. Everything is linked within the body. The function, the brain is linked to every part of the body, that the body, for it to function properly and appropriately and healthily, all the systems are all linked to one another. That's fact. Okay? You don't have to go to pre-med to understand what I'm saying. Okay? Or veterinary school, if you have that dog. Okay? So, God created a world. The world rises and falls based on the behavior of a Jew. We infuse the world with holiness, with Kedusha, which is holiness. An infusion of mega spirituality that generates unlimited blessing, material blessing, which we read in last week's reading. If you dedicate it to my Torah, and you observe it, and you study it, and you toil for it, bounty will come, unlimited bounty. And you're studying only purely for the sake of understanding and disseminating it. But if you meet all these criteria, what happens? All of a sudden, There's action, which causes a reaction. We release energies. Those energies touch something else. When those other things are touched, there's a reaction, and that reaction brings about certain things for all existence. All existence is infused with an enrichment. The fruits of the tree, the vegetables, the quality of life, the abundance. But how does it work? As in the body, everything's linked to everything else. Man being the center of the universe, every aspect of the universe is linked to man's behavior. We have a linkage. You put on your tefillin, that activates a certain type of energy. You study Torah, which is all-encompassing, it activates another energy. You do it qualitatively, not with an ulterior motive. You do it for the sake of God. You do it with love. You do it with reverence. That's a much more intense, positive energy. You've infused it. That brings about another result. So all existence responds immediately to our behavior. You know, the Mishnah tells us in certain locations, Sanhedrin, that sleep is good for the evil and it's good for the world. Why? Because when the evil man sleeps, he does less wrong. So it's good for him that he's not doing the wrong thing. And it's good for the world that he's not perpetrating bad things. So the world is unaffected by his misbehavior. So it's in the world's best interest, the Russia, the evil one, should sleep because he's temporarily not functional. He's out of commission. The tzaddik, when he sleeps, it's not good for him. It's not good for the world. Because the tzaddik, when he's sleeping, he's not performing his duties as a Jew, living within the confines or the Torah itself. What about teaching others, affecting others? Sleeps, it's not happening. Can't be a role model when he's sleeping. But when he's awake and he's functional and he's flicking all those switches, which every time he flicks a switch, mega energy is released. That's the tzaddik. But every bit of his behavior is only because it's linked, and every bit of every Jew's behavior is linked to all existence. We find that the Jewish people are compared to the stars of the heaven. God says to Abraham, your children be like the stars of the heaven. Like the sand on the seashore. As you can't count the granules of sand, your children will not be able to count it. As you're not able to count the stars, your children will not be able to be counted. That's how numerous they'll be. So we said many times, we're not talking about quantitative, we're talking about qualitative. The innate qualitative value of a Jew. Give an example. At one time, when the computers first came out, a computer was 3 stories high and was contained like in a building. Today, you could have a laptop or even something smaller, which is able to process information multiple times of what this 3-story computer was able to produce and process. Why? Because the chips in these computers, that a chip, you could have nothing larger than your nail. You can have millions of pieces of information. That's how tiny it is, or less than a nail. Not to be understood, but it's a reality. And if you have the programming in your computer, you're able to do, especially now with artificial intelligence, you're able to do things that would have taken weeks to put together, and you're able to coalesce information and gather information within literally minutes. And it's even more profound than what you do on your own in weeks. That's where we're at. With a press of a button, it all just comes together. Just have to know what buttons to press. Hashem linked the neshama of the Jew to every aspect of existence. Every Jew is linked to every aspect of existence. Therefore, every Jew, we have a proper thought. We say a proper word. We do a proper action. We study Torah. Immediately, the whole world is upgraded. Upgraded. What about if the Jew fails? God forbid. And we violate the Torah. Every bit of our being is linked to every part of this existence. The moment you fail, things are already taken down. The world is compromised. You may not sense it, but the reality it is. But how? Why would I fail? Why is the world compromised? Because there's a linkage. We're linked. Every bit of existence is linked exactly to the soul and the action of the Jew itself. The non-Jew, it's not the case. Today with science, the more they understand, the more they realize that they don't understand. The various systems and processes that take place in existence. You plant the seed, how it germinates, photosynthesis, everything, how everything works together. The word genius can't even be said. It's divine genius. A hair follicle, what's contained in the hair, the protein, whatever it is, and how it grows, and what's the base for the color, the pigment, all pigment to everything, not to be believed. And we're talking about its relative borders on the infinite in terms of what exists within existence, in terms of this genius. That's what it is. But all that genius is for what? To be affected, impacted by what? By the behavior of the Jew. Because man, and that's the meaning, man is the center of the universe. When we say, B'shvili nivra olam, the world was created for me, it's not arrogance. It's a reality. It's a truth. The world was created for me, mean every bit of the world is linked to me, to my behavior. I can take the world up, I can take it down. If Rav Chanina Mendoza, the heavenly voice comes out every day and says, the whole world is sustained in his merit. How's that possible? The quality of his action and the intensity of his action is able to activate systems which are able to support the whole world. So that's the Greek, how it's linked. One Jew. So if you have multiple Jews, we read in last week's reading in the Tochacha, if we behave and follow the proper path, it says 1 Jew will pursue 100 of the enemy. Five Jews will pursue 100. 5 Jews will pursue 100. And not only 5 Jews will pursue 100, 100 Jews will pursue 10,000. So the question is, the mathematics doesn't work. If 5 Jews pursues 100, how many of the enemy is each Jew pursuing? 20. So if you multiply that, now you have 100 Jews. So how many Jews should 100 pursue? 2,000 of the enemy. But it says they'll pursue 10,000 of the enemy. Right? It should be the multiples of whatever 5 do. 5 is 100. 100 is what? Is 2,000. But it says 10,000. So the Minchas says you cannot compare a smaller number who study Torah to a larger number who study Torah. A smaller number study Torah, they have one dimension of power. The other 100, when you have 100 people who study Torah, we're talking about mega power. It's beyond 5. But when they go into war, they're not studying Torah. You cannot compare less studying Torah to more studying Torah. But that's when you go to war, you're studying Torah. But who's going to war? We're talking about people who have mega ability. Their actions carry tremendous weight. So if you have 5 people study Torah, what degree of weight does it carry that you're able to override systems in the natural order? 5 pursue 100. What if you have 100 of such people? There's multiples of which is the most exceptional level of achievement. 10,000. If we would understand what we're talking about now, we could understand it. If we would internalize what we're saying now, that's a reality. You know, you have the dike and there's a hole in the dike. And you can put your finger in that dike and save a community, because otherwise it will be inundated because the water's going to start coming through that hole. And you don't put your finger in the dike. What is your level of culpability? The only reason why the community was destroyed was because you didn't put your finger in the dike. But if you would have put your finger in the dike, the community would remain at home. Every Jew being linked to every bit of existence, doing something positive, it will have a positive effect on existence. And when he does negative, he behaves in a transgressional context. He's pulling his finger out of the dike, or he's not securing it. So liability and deservingness is all determined by us making choices. You choose to do the right thing, that's an infusion. Why is it infusion? Because God linked the action of the Jew to every aspect of existence. It touches every aspect, because it activates those forces, which all existence is linked to those forces. That's what sustains those forces. You do the wrong thing, it tones down, it begins waning. You don't have that response.